all I could think to myself was like, why are you guys playing the victims? You broke all the rules.
You're now listening to the Wandering Buffalo podcast with your hosts, Andrew Chang and Justin Goddard.
Hello and welcome to the Wandering Buffalo podcast, a show on the Built-in Buffalo Network. My name is Andrew Chang, and as always, my co-host Justin Goddard is with me as well. Today, Justin and I are going to preview the Monday Night Football matchup against the Tennessee Titans, and you know the drill now. We're going to talk about how they're currently doing, what the media thinks of them, what we want to see, what we don't want to see, and ultimately our game predictions. As always, you can find us on most social media and podcasting platforms, and even on YouTube by searching The Wandering Buffalo Podcast. And if you don't like our show, we have other amazing content on the Built-in Buffalo Network, and I'm sure they have something that you'd like. Justin, how are you doing tonight?
Dude, I am still riding high and still sleep deprived. Coming off that Sunday night win in Kansas City.
Mm-hmm.
I know I predicted a loss, and God, do I love being wrong right now. How are you today?
I'm doing great. I can't complain. You know, after this podcast, I gotta take on my role as, what feels like a New York Jets volleyball player, because my team is terrible and we're gonna get destroyed probably. But I have a lot of fun doing it. But to comment on you being wrong, I'm very happy that you're wrong. I predicted a W, and I felt pretty good about it. So, and spoiler alert, I'm gonna predict a W here as well, but we'll still get into everything. So this game, I believe it's gonna be our second consecutive road trip. It's gonna be at Nissan Stadium, and historically the last two matchups there, Bills Mafia really makes their presence felt there. I don't know what it is about Tennessee, but it's just clear that Bills Mafia travels in waves there. The game's going to be at 8:15. It's supposed to be 69 degrees, sunny with a little bit of wind, which is really, really nice for a change of pace. It just seems like the last two games were rainy, and to your point that you mentioned earlier, there was a weather delay in that Kansas City game and lightning, and I'm kind of happy that the Bills don't have to play in that. But yeah, I'm just excited because it won't neutralize the offense and or defense anymore, and we'll get to have a lot of more good football out there. Well, how do you feel about that weather?
Listen, man, I know a lot can change between now and then, but this is another primetime game.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do another weather delay like that. That was, I had it all worked out. You know, Bills game's going to be wrapping up around 11:30 at the latest. I get in bed. I had a dentist appointment at 7:30 the next morning, and right to work after it. So I'm gonna need the weather to stay nice for me, because we finally got these primetime games, and I need them to stay in their scheduled time slots.
Yeah, that would be ideal. But hey, you know, I wouldn't. I love watching football, so part of me was like, oh no, we have a weather delay, but hey, I get to watch more football, I guess. Even though they ran through the highlights 18 times, and like, I get it. I know who won the games. Anyways, you know, let's talk about how this team's currently doing. They just beat down the Titans, the Titans just beat down the Jaguars 37-19. And we know the Jaguars are kind of in a weird spot right now, with, pun intended, the spotlight being on Urban Meyer and his questionable decisions at a bar. But hey, you know, the Titans did their job, and they beat up on an NFL team nonetheless, and that's an NFL quality team. Kind of like how the Bills stomped on the Dolphins and the Texans. So I can't take away from that victory, because you play who you play. Currently, the Titans sit at the fourth spot in the AFC, I believe, and they're currently at the top of the AFC South at 3-2. And this looks like a playoff team because they're most likely going to win their division, don't you think?
Yeah, I think Jacksonville we can get into down the road because we play them later in the season. Indy is not looking like the team I thought they were going to be. With Carson Wentz being hurt and what they thought they had there. Their defense also doesn't look the same as it does last year. It feels like it's going to end up being a pretty weak division to win, but it looks like they're pretty much on track to win it nonetheless.
Yeah, and I gotta say, I'm not surprised that the Colts aren't doing that good with Carson Wentz because this man just fell off a cliff, and I have a huge Eagles fan as a friend, and he was suggesting that, we're going to get a first for Carson Wentz, and all I could think to myself was, there's no way that a team is going to hand over a first-round pick for Carson Wentz, and then the Colts go we'll give you a first if he plays 75% of the time, but if he doesn't, we'll give you a second. So I thought that was a pretty bad move for the Colts, and so far it's not, at least to the record, it's not showing up to be a great decision. And they just suffered a pretty back-breaking loss on Monday Night Football. So I think the Titans have a clear path to win the division because the Texans and the Jaguars aren't going to put up much of a fight, in my opinion.
Yeah, the good news for the Colts is it looks like that's going to end up only being a second-round pick they give him because he hasn't been able to stay healthy, and I think the threshold for it to become a first-round pick is if he plays 75% of all the snaps, and he's not projected to be doing that right now. So we'll see what they look like when he's fully healthy and all that. But yeah, not a good start to the experiment for them so far.
Right. Anyways, you know what time it is. We got to go into the strengths and weaknesses of this team, courtesy of Sportskeeda, the Tennessean, and PFF. So, obviously, one of the main strengths is King Henry. He's a living monster truck, in my opinion. You got to have an eye on him at all times, and I'm not trying to get stiff-armed. I'm not trying to see anyone on the Bills' defense get stiff-armed. And the last time the Bills played the Titans, they kept him relatively in check. But, I don't know. I never take something like that for granted because the Titans still won that game. And King Henry was still able to score a touchdown in that game. And it just, even if you do pull out all the stops to try to contain King Henry, there's still a possibility that he's just going to break away from you and still create a highlight play, e.g. Josh Norman stiff arm.
Yeah, I think you have to put the respect on Derrick Henry. I mean, he's an absolute beast. He's a force. But I will say the last couple times we've played the Titans, it seems like we were really able to focus in on him and really limit him. He had, granted, he had 2 touchdowns last time we played him, but we did hold him to 57 yards. And honestly, it's in the past, so I'm not going to cry victim on it or anything. But playing them last year was just a really weird circumstance. They had the COVID outbreak. We were going to reschedule the game. Then the game was going to be Monday night. Then we end up playing Tuesday at 5. It's in the pouring rain. There's just so much that went into that game that it was just a very out of the ordinary game in general. So that being said, I think, we just came in with a defensive game plan to pretty much mitigate Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, and Travis Kelce. So I'm beginning to have a lot more faith in our defense, in McDermott and Frazier, on putting together a game plan that really takes away what the team wants to do. And I think with Tennessee, yes, there's other ways they move the ball, but I think it all starts through getting Derrick Henry going. So Not, again, like you said, not going to take it for granted that we can shut him down again, but I'm a lot more confident this year than I was this time last year.
I would agree. I think our run defense is significantly better than last year, and it's hard to point to one single reason why, but I think Star Lotulelei has made a strong impact on that defensive line, which has freed up a lot of the other linemen to have one-on-ones and help Tremaine and all that stuff. And again, I'm not an expert, so there could be other factors, or, hey, maybe this defense just overall stepped up. And to comment on that Tuesday night Titans matchup, I am still very upset with it, because at the end, when they won and all the interviews and the commentators, they were like, this team overcame so much, and, I can't believe they were able to, pull it all together and beat the Buffalo Bills. And all I could think to myself was like, why are you guys playing the victims? You broke all the rules and created these outbreaks and made us keep pushing the game back and back and back. Don't play the victim here, because you did that on your own. So I was pretty upset about that.
Tell me how you feel.
I'm just saying, don't say oh, I'm the victim, but I broke all the rules, so feel bad for me. Get out of here. I stupid. Anyways, Justin, we put out a poll on Twitter about how worried you kind of felt about Derrick Henry. So we had 4 choices: very worried, worried, I'm a little worried, and I'm not worried at all. Where do you see yourself on that poll, and why?
I landed in small worried.
Okay.
I do think Derrick Henry's the type he's going to go out there and he's going to get his. There's not many teams in the league that can really completely shut him down. But I think with the defensive focus being able to be on him, we don't exactly know the health of Julio Jones. A.J. Brown looks like he's going to be okay. Mm-hmm. But even at that, Tannehill is a pretty good quarterback, but he doesn't put any real fear into me. So I think we can really key in on stopping Henry and dare Ryan Tannehill to beat us, and I'll take my chances with our secondary.
So you were in the worry category, and I was in the majority of voters. So here's the breakdown. 4% said they were very worried, 10% said they were worried, 54% said I'm a little worried, which is where I'm at, and then 32% said I'm not worried at all. I guess I'm a little more optimistic, and I mentioned this before. I think our run defense is significantly better than last year's. So that's why I kind of went into the I'm a little worried section, because to your point, he's going to get his no matter what. And you mentioned that we were able to contain him a little bit last year, but he still got 2 touchdowns on that Monday night or Tuesday night game. So is that really containing him? I don't know. He put 14 points on the board himself. So whatever. Let's move on to the next strength, and that's Ryan Tannehill. And as of right now, per your research, it looks like he's middle of the pack in terms of statistics. He's definitely really good in the play action, and he's athletic, and he can make really good plays when he wants to with his legs. Although I will say, when he scores a touchdown and he does that weird jump man finger roll thing, I always want to just slap him in the face, just because, I don't know, I just feel like there are cooler celebrations out there. I don't know. I don't know how you feel about that.
Finger roll's not bad if you can't dunk.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way about Steph Curry. When he hits a 3, he does the shoulder shimmy thing. That's what you come up with. There are way cooler celebrations out there, and you got to do that.
What we learned today is that if Andrew ever makes the NFL, he's going to have top-notch celebrations.
Oh, my God. I mean, you could keep it simple and clean. Who was... We'll go into celebrations a different time. Tell me your thoughts about Ryan Tannehill.
Yeah, so he's currently ranked 15th in passing yards, 18th in passing touchdowns. But I have him kind of like just outside the top 10, in the top 15. I think his numbers are a little bit down this year. It's been kind of a weird start to the season. A.J. Brown and Julio Jones have both missed some time with injuries, and that's his two main weapons right there outside of Derrick Henry. But you're also looking at an offseason where they lost Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator. You lost Jonnu Smith, obviously ends up with the Patriots in free agency. So I do still think that there's a little bit of a gelling out process going on there. But I think Tannehill's a pretty good quarterback. I guess maybe we're seeing that Arthur Smith's scheme was really beneficial to him. But he's definitely still a quarterback that I have respect for. I do think that he's not the type of quarterback that you win games in spite of. He is a guy that can win you games if you give him the opportunity.
Yeah, and thank God. Shout out to my man, Adam Gase, for ruining this man's first start to the NFL and not making the Dolphins a factor. And so thank you for doing that and letting Tannehill realize his full potential as a Tennessee Titan. Thank you. You're awesome.
Love that guy.
Oh, for sure. Let's move on to the other strengths here, and that's, as you just mentioned, Julio Jones and A.J. Brown. So let's start with Julio. Julio is Julio. He's got a slow start to this season, and he missed the last 2 games, I believe, with injuries. But you can't discount this man. He can win at every single level on the field. I think about that Super Bowl, which, they ultimately lost, which sucked. But I think about that catch that he had on the sidelines, which was one of the most improbable catches I've ever seen. And then later on, you saw Julian Edelman make one of the most improbable catches I've ever seen in my entire life. So overall, pretty good game, but I thought Julio, that catch right there by Julio, just embodies the type of receiver that he is. When it doesn't look like it's happening, it can happen.
Yeah, Julio Jones was, it was floated around a little bit. Like, should Buffalo go after him? I don't think he was ever going to be the right fit in Buffalo just based on all the pieces that we had. But I think he's a great fit with Tennessee, and he's one of my favorite receivers of all time. He's up there with Larry Legend, of just dudes that I kind of came up watching, like, as I started to really understand football. And Julio Jones he was always getting those 50-50 balls. He was muscling you around. He just really does everything out there. So I have tremendous respect for him. That being said, yes, I still think he's a great receiver, but I don't think he's quite the game-breaking player that he used to be. I just think he's a very good receiver. Compensation that Tennessee gave up and everything aside, I think it was a great move to bring him in. But he's not the same player that just strikes the fear of God into me like he would have been 2-3 years ago. Yeah,
and let's hope that you're right this time when the Bills play up against them, because historically I feel like receivers such as Julio Jones and A.J. Brown, we'll get to them in a second, are the type of receivers that the Bills have trouble with, the big, towering, shifty ones. So we'll have to hope that we can contain Julio and that he has lost a step, which is kind of weird to say because I love Julio. Anyways, let's go on to A.J. Brown. He's also having a bit of a slow start to this season, and he's been dealing with some injuries, and I'm pretty sure in the offseason he had his knees repaired. And this guy is single-handedly ruining my fantasy football team. And it's killing me. It's killing me. I mean, I get it. He's hurt. I understand that and whatnot, and I want you to get healthy, but come on, dude. Come on. And I guess all last season, too, he played with injured knees, which is crazy to me because he played through that and still was balling out. And I just can't imagine what he would be like if he was healthy. So I think he's trying to go through the motions and get to that point, which would greatly help this team because you saw what happened in New York in New Jersey when A.J. Brown and Julio Jones were out. Like, it was just Henry, and Tannehill had no one to throw to. And basically, ultimately, cost the Titans the game because the Jets were able to expose that, wide receiver depth and cost them the game.
Yeah, A.J. Brown's the type of player that reminds me of Julio a few years ago. Just the big physical receiver. He'll bully you for some 50-50 balls. I mean, really, as a quarterback, you got to put the ball somewhere near him and give him a chance, and he'll make defenses pay. So at this current juncture, I have a bit more concern about A.J. Brown going into this game, especially Julio's still sitting questionable right now. It's early in the week, but he didn't practice today. But for the sake of the Bills this week, I hope that A.J. Brown continues ruining your fantasy team.
Well, to be fair, I tried trading him for Justin Jefferson, and the guy who was considering was like, well, let's just see how he does for one more week, and if he does solid, I'll trade him. What happens? He gets hurt. You know who else on my team got hurt that week? Christian McCaffrey. My team is just out the window. Unbelievable.
You're in the struggles.
Yeah, I definitely am. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for the strengths. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about the just the weaknesses in general of the Tennessee Titans, and then wrap up today's episode. Stick around. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. We're going to wrap up today's episode by talking about the Tennessee Titans' weaknesses, and we got to start here by talking about the tight end position, Justin. Obviously, we know Jonnu Smith was lost in free agency and he signed in New England. And there was a lot of chatter out there, at least from Bills Mafia and people on social media in general were saying, like, the Bills should sign Jonnu Smith. They should sign him. And we ultimately know that didn't happen. And, so far it looks like that was a great decision by Brandon Beane not to pick up a tight end such as Jonnu Smith. But they never really replaced him, and behind him they have a guy named Anthony Firkser, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. And he's not necessarily a bad tight end, but he's definitely not a tight end one that will keep you up late at night game planning for. So ultimately, at the end of the day, he's not Dawson Knox.
Yeah, I mean, Dawson Knox has started out the season really strong, and it's really nothing against Firkser. I think filling Jonnu Smith's shoes were hard, especially in this offense where they really put him as a focal point last year, opening up the play-action game and using like the tight end down the seam. He's just not quite the same player as Jonnu Smith. And even seeing Jonnu Smith in New England right now, maybe we're seeing that it was more the system that Arthur Smith was running that made him so successful, because he's not really doing a ton in New England right now. But yeah, tight end is definitely a position where this time last year I was much more concerned about Smith going in than Firkser. That's a hard one.
Yes. Yes, it is. And I didn't pronounce his name correctly. Probably I should do a better job of looking up how to pronounce these people's names. But hey, if you listened to last week's episode, I did pronounce Kels name correct, not Kelsey. All right.
Nailed it.
Anyways, let's move on to the next weakness here, and that's the kicker carousel. And I would 100% agree with this weakness. First week they trot out, and before I even kind of go into this has been a consistent weakness of this team for multiple years, or at least for the past 2 years, in my opinion. And who they have last year, got Gotskowski, and then they brought in someone else. It's almost Bears-like, except
they have Rodrigo
Blank
with the glasses. Didn't they have Blankenship?
No, they had Suckup. No, you're thinking about
right.
Rodrigo Blankenship for the Colts.
You're right. I love that guy. Sorry.
Yeah. Anyways, kicker carousel, and it's been, years over years, and this year it's no different. Week 1, they trot out Badgley, who went 0 for 1 on field goals, 1 for 2 on extra points. Week 2, they have Bullock, 4 for 5, but only had a long of 36 yards. Doesn't really prove anything to me. Week 3, you reported that he was perfect. Week 4, he went 3 for 4, and then week 5, 1 for 1 on field goals, 4 for 5 on extra points. That is too up and down for my likings, and you know what it kind of reminds me of? Oh my God, Hauschka, when right after the Bills kind of gave him that extension, where you were like, oh, Hauschka's going to be good, and then he was just so up and down, left and right, and you just and even the team wasn't confident in his ability to kick a field goal, so they were just like, all right, just keep the offense out there, because we don't know what we have in this guy. And I don't know if that's how the Tennessee Titans view their kicker, but I don't personally think that the kicker is a position that the Titans look at and feel good about.
Yeah, and since they started going with Bullock, there's been a bit more consistency at the very least, but I mean, you're still talking averaging a miss per week. You got a total of 2-3 missed PATs in there through 5 weeks. It's just kind of, for me, if I can't even trust my kicker to go out there and hit a PAT, I know it's a harder kick than what it used to be, but those should be, for the most part, automatic. Mm-hmm. So I think this is kind of an area where it might open up an opportunity to keep points off the board, even if it's 3 points with them, maybe a 4th and 5 or something like that, not quite trusting their kicker and giving us an opportunity to get a 4th down stand, get the ball back in fairly good field position, and just keep the attempt of points off the board, because they might not trust their kicker right now.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, the Bills benefited from their, I think two seasons ago, the Bills won against the Titans solely because their kicker missed like 4 or 5 field goals. Something really egregious like that, and no surprise here, but he got cut after that game. And that team not being able to figure out the kicker situation is almost like, it's just super annoying. It's almost like having a splinter in your finger. Like, it doesn't hurt that bad, but it's super annoying, and this team just feels like they can't get it out of their finger, or I guess their foot, to put it in better terms. Moving on to their next weakness, and that's got to be safety, right? They still have Kevin Byard back there, who's a good player in my opinion, but they also lost Kenny Vaccaro in the offseason, and I believe to a cap casualty. And now replacing him is Amani Hooker, who I don't believe has the same continuity as Vaccaro had with Byard. So that's a big loss, in my opinion, to that secondary. So it's kind of like when Micah Hyde or Jordan Poyer are out for a game. I don't necessarily think that the position group's going to do poorly, but I just know from a continuity and communication standpoint, it's not going to be the same. So definitely an area of weakness in my opinion.
Yeah, I think Kevin Byard is one of the best safeties in the game. I think he and Kenny Vaccaro played very well together, and we just haven't seen quite the same chemistry with Amani Hooker. Mixed into that with the fact that they don't have the greatest cornerbacks in the league, and I think it just kind of becomes a little bit too much ground for one very good player to make up for the deficiencies elsewhere.
Yeah, and then moving on to the last weakness here, and that's got to be quarterback depth. Now, I want to preface this by saying, Bills Mafia, we are so lucky to have Mitch Trubisky as our backup. You know, going into the season before Brandon Beane signed Mitch Trubisky, we had Matt Barkley. You know where Matt Barkley went? He went to the Tennessee Titans in the offseason. Didn't end up making that team, and this is kind of funny. Well, I feel bad because he didn't end up making that team, but the Titans' backup is Logan Woodside, and I see your notes here, Justin. You have never heard of this quarterback before, and neither have I, and it's comical to me because if he came in, I guarantee anyone who's watching that game is like, who the... like, at least if you're a Bills fan. But, you know, if you didn't know the Bills team, but you were just kind of a football fan in general, if for whatever reason Josh Allen goes down, let's hope that doesn't happen, you trot out Mitch Trubisky, and then you as a viewer go like, oh, well, at least they have Mitch Trubisky. I know that player. He played for the Bears and was like, okay. You trot out someone like Logan Woodside, you're scratching your head, and you're like, who is that? Definitely not an area of depth or strength.
Yeah, they kind of remind me of like the Jets quarterback room, where it's like they decided to go into the season with a rookie quarterback, and they're like, we'll have James Morgan back him up. Like, it just doesn't really make sense to me. There's so much talent in the league, and I guess if you have a quarterback like Tannehill, you don't necessarily need a Matt Barkley as like a clipboard holder to help him see things and whatnot. But I just don't know how you can go into the season with the plan of, you know, if Tannehill does miss any time, don't worry, we got Logan Woodside. It'll be great. Just
right.
An interesting plan.
Right. Well, that's going to wrap it up for the weaknesses. And just real quick, Justin, what are you most worried about going into this Monday Night Showdown?
So despite my idea that I think the Bills will be able to keep him contained, I think that's really easy to say and really hard to do. So my biggest concern going into this game would definitely be Derrick Henry and the effect that he can have on a game.
Yeah, I agree. He's just an absolute beast, and I'm kind of kicking myself over the fact that I didn't draft him in my fantasy football team. But, of course, I mean, Christian McCaffrey was right there. I had to take him, right? Wrong. I didn't have to do that to myself, but I did. So I guess I'm a masochist. All right, let's transition to our last segment, which is things we want to see and what we don't want to see. Justin, you know how this goes. Each of us have one from each of the categories to talk about, and I'm going to let you start. What is something that you want to see out of this game?
Yeah, so for me, coming off of that Chiefs game and just really seeing our offense be able to move the ball, I just kind of want to see that keep rolling into this week against the Titans. I think they're also a team that doesn't have a very prolific defense. And I think our defense can answer the call against their offense. So I just kind of want to see a little bit of revenge, show that they still got that taste in their mouth from the whole debacle of the Tuesday night game last year, and just really come out and fire on all cylinders offensively. Mm-hmm. Go out there and drop a 40 burger on them.
Right. And I guess what I want to see is I want to see this Bills offense test that communication and continuity between those safeties, so Byard and Hooker. Make them communicate. Make them play at a high level. And if they can't do it, I want to see this team take advantage of it. Whether that's, calling to other players saying, like, hey, you got to take this dude, or hey, if he goes here, do this. Make them talk as much as possible and just expose them for what they are. And it's not a bad group, but I just don't think that they have enough time on task to play that well together. And maybe I'm wrong, but hey, this is what I want to see. But what I don't want to see, I just don't want to see the Bills fall victim to that shell-style defense that they fell victim to on that Tuesday night game. Now, Josh Allen has seen that type of defense a lot since that game, and I think he's kind of learned how to take a profit, and I think he's a way better player now than he was on that Tuesday night game. But I don't want to see that Josh Allen again, I guess, because the Titans really kind of, I guess, if you want to be all fancy and say something here, put out a blueprint on how to stop Josh Allen there. But we know it wasn't really a blueprint because he's had success against that defense ever since. So, again, I don't want to see him, I guess, fall victim to that scheme.
I like that. For me, I'm more on the defensive side. We've looked much better against the run this year, and what I don't want to see is really anything profound from Derrick Henry this game. I would like to come out of the Titans game just really feeling like it's not a mirage of our run defense looking good as like a product of bad teams we've played or circumstances of games or whatever. If you come into a game against the Titans and you're able to hold a guy like Derrick Henry in check, that's going to go a very long way for me in really believing that the run defense is what we need it to be.
Right. Justin, who do you have winning this game?
I got the Bills winning this game, and I have since adjusted my score prediction since the Kansas City game. I had this one being much lower scoring, but I'm going to go weird game, weird score. I got the Bills scoring 40, winning the game 40-19.
I don't do score predictions, but I do have this team winning. I just don't think the Tennessee Titans are a good matchup in terms. I don't think that their defense is a good matchup for our offense, and I think that this run defense has taken a significant step forward from last year. So I think they can pull back or contain the Derrick Henry more than they did last year. And if Julio can't go, then they just have A.J. Brown to worry about, because the wide receiver depth outside of him and Julio isn't great. And to my point, and as I mentioned earlier, we saw the Jets take advantage of it. So if the Jets can take advantage of it, I know the Bills can take advantage of it. All that to say, give me a W. For sure.
Keep it rolling.
Yeah. Anyways, that's going to wrap it up for this week's podcast episode on the game preview. I'm going to redo that because that just felt weird. 43 minutes. Sorry, Jake. We usually don't have these many edits. It's just, I swear it's when you're in the podcast that things start messing up, man. It's you. It's not
Jake's
us.
making
it's
us
you.
nervous.
Anyways, that's going to wrap it up for this episode on the Wandering Buffalo podcast. Thanks for listening. Go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, and review our podcast as well as other amazing shows that you can find on the Built-in Buffalo Network. We're always looking for amazing guests and segments to be on our show. So if you want to be part of our show, feel free to reach out to us on our social media platforms or email us by searching up the Wandering Buffalo podcast. Justin, where can the people find you?
You can find me on any social medias at jgods22.
And as always, you can find me at 2changs. That's going to do it for this episode. Take care, and let's hope for a Bills W. Go Bills!
Go Bills!